Hello, fans, and welcome. It's official. The Arizona Coyotes have relocated to Utah, and while the season is over, the fun is about to begin. I'm Randon, and alongside my co-hosts Dustin and Ryan, we will bring you inside the team, giving you all the news, highlights, and an in-depth analysis on everything the NHL in Utah has to offer. Welcome to another episode of The Two-Line Pass. Welcome in, fans. Another episode of the Two-Line Pass podcast. Here with you as always, Randon. I'm joined by my best buddies, Ryan and Dustin. Guys, how you doing? Today we're going to talk about the draft and free agency. It's here. It's ready. We can touch it. We can reach out and touch it. Are you guys ready for this?
You know, last week I told you I was dealing with coughing because of my allergies. I'm still dealing with it. I don't think it's allergies anymore. I think I had some sort of bronchitis or some jacked up shit, but I'm getting over it. So I'm good and ready.
This is excellent. Ryan, are you ready?
I'm super excited for today's episode. Lots of exciting things happened in day one. I'm excited and ready to go.
Well, it's here. The roster is taking shape. This is what we've talked about in terms of introducing you to players and asking ourselves, who is going to still be on this team? Who are we going to add to this team? And we've had the two big ones. We've had the NHL entry-level draft over the weekend in Las Vegas. I got to say, it was probably the best production value NHL draft. It's not like I went out of my way to watch the last 15 years of drafts, but I got to say, having it in the Sphere in Las Vegas just set a tone of the NHL kind of saying, we're here. We know we're not on par with the NFL. We know we're not on par with the NBA, but we'll be damned if we're not going to be the third most watched sport in America. And with ESPN behind them, I think they're really going all in on production values. Guys, did you have a chance to actually watch the draft and see any of that? Not just for Utah's picks and things, but how did you feel about the way the NHL presented the draft?
I didn't watch the draft, but I watched highlights of picks being made, especially Utah's, and with it being in the Sphere, how they had it lined up to where it was going from behind where the announcements were being made and up along the top of the Sphere. That looked really cool, and yeah, the production value is way up there. So it was very cool to see at least highlights from that.
I thought it was a nice step up from the normal just commissioners in a suit or the GMs in a suit with a little stupid card where they would be like, here's a draft pick. It was one thing I didn't like were all the stupid celebrities announced. I'm sorry, not to be that guy, but I'm going to say it. Celine Dion. Why were you there? I don't care. I'll say it. Matty Beniers making the first draft pick for Seattle because he's there. Shut up. Just draft your pick. Come on, guys. We don't need all this. But shout out Ryan Smith because we got booed before we even did anything. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let Calgary fans boo us because we took their guy. Fight us, Calgary fans.
You can't boo us. We haven't done anything yet. An all-timer from Smith. But hey, let's get right into it. Why, you ask, might Calgary Flames fans be mad at the Utah Hockey Club? Well, with their very first franchise pick in franchise history, the Utah Hockey Club selects center Tij Iginla, son of Flames legend Jarome Iginla. Ryan, you picked this. You saw it. I thought for sure they were going to go defense there, and you said, hey, they're going to take Iginla. Ryan, obviously you got to be excited about this pick, right?
I am. I called that shit. Nobody can tell me I didn't. But if you think about it, he's really the perfect pick on a guy to bring in because he's got name, his name alone is going to bring in viewers because guys are going to be like, oh yeah, I watched his dad chase a cup and arguably be one of the most entertaining players and captains in recent NHL history. His dad's a Hall of Famer. We already have Shane Doan's son, Josh Doan, which is going to bring over some more name value. Get the two of them together with some chemistry. It's golden. And Tij plays just like his dad, but better. He's better at everything than his dad was. And I mean that with all due respect to Jarome. He was incredible, but his kid is, you know what I mean? It's just one step better. And I like a guy who's not afraid to fight. And if you guys got to watch the clip of him showing Marshawn Lynch how to lock up in a hockey fight, one of the most fun things you could do is watching this 17-year-old kid. Like when he stiffens out on him, like Lynch is like, oh shit, like, oh God.
It's just a little bit of fun, and they said even if Tij was a fraction of what his dad was, we'd be lucky to have him, and I think he's going to be just as good, if not better. Dustin, were you excited about the Iginla pick? How much did you know about him? What do you have to say about him?
I mean, obviously, I recognize the name Iginla, even as like a casual hockey fan. That's a name that you know, even if you're just sort of like an outside observer who's paying attention to your team and not really following the whole league too closely. That's a name that you know. I asked you for like a brief summary of what you thought about that pick, and Ryan just said like he's better than his dad. And you know what? That man had a 20-year career. He's in the Pro Hockey Hall of Fame. He's set like franchise records for like goals and games and points and everything. So if you've got a guy like that who played 2 decades in the league and set records, and at your age, you're already being talked about by somebody who I believe knows the game pretty well inside and out, and telling me that he's better than his dad was and he has better skills than his dad did, that's got my excitement through the roof. I'm eggplanting over here, if you will. So I'm very excited for this one.
Stop. I can only get so erect. He's going to be so fantastic. I think he's going to be a lot like Logan Cooley, where I think we're going to see him this year. And I hope at least we see him this year. I don't want to see him go back to the minors or to the AHL. I think he's a kid who's going to be ready. And I think we have a need at center. So it'll be exciting to see him. But he wasn't the only person drafted. The Utah Hockey Club also traded to get another first rounder in Cole Baudouin or Baudouin. You can maybe pronounce the N. We were practicing a little bit of that. Who's another really tough, really skilled center. And then 4 straight defensemen picked in Will Scahan, Thomas Lavoie, Veti Väisänen, Gregor Bieber, and then we get back to the forwards in Gabe Smith and Owen Allard, both centers. I really think Owen Allard's going to be something special. It's going to take a few years, but watch for it. You're going to be saying Owen Allard's name. And then Elise Czech, Wojtek Radek, and Ludwig Lofton was the last defenseman selected out of the Swedish. So the Ludwig fans, I think Ryan's going to get Ludwig's jersey, and I might get Wojtek's jersey. We'll see if they ever play. That's one thing that you have to realize about the NHL is you stock up a lot of these players who might never actually play in the NHL. And they may be perennial minor leaguers, whether they play overseas in the European elite leagues. They can't play in the Canadian juniors for very long. So usually they're playing in either the European elite leagues or the American minor league system, whether that's the AHL or the ECHL, depends on the player's skill. But overall, guys, what are you thinking in terms of if you had to grade the Utah Hockey Club's first ever draft, what grade are you giving? We'll go to Ryan first, then to Dustin.
For our first draft, we had the most amount of picks. Am I right? We had 11 through the 7, which is, I mean, you really can't go like if 3 out of the 7 or I guess like 4 out of the 11, if they hit, perfect. Like that's more than you can expect most years. But I got a good feeling about those bottom 2 guys, the last guys we got in the 7th round, Ludwig and Wojtek. I think they are going to be franchise players in the next 5 years. I called Tij Iginla. I'm putting my stamp on these 2 as well. They're going to be the guys. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the day after, but sometime they'll be the guy.
Call it the Ludwig lock. Dustin, Ryan, did you give a grade? What was your grade?
Oh, I did not. I completely skipped over that. I'm going to give it a B. I'm going to give it a B plus. I think it was solid. Drafting 4 straight defensemen, I like it because that's one position in the NHL you can never have enough depth at. And if one or two of those guys turns out to be a top one or top two would be amazing. But if they just turn out to be a bottom three defenseman, I'm okay with that. You know, you got to have guys who, his injuries happen, especially on the blue line, and especially in today's game with forwards and how fast they're getting. Blue line guys, you got to be quick, and being quick, trying to skate backwards leads to a lot of injuries or potential injuries. So I'm going to give it a B.
Dustin, what grade overall are you giving the first franchise draft?
You know, I got a little excited when Ryan said B to start with, because I was over here thinking I was going to give a B plus, because I was like, okay, well, at least there's a little bit of difference. He's going B, I'm going B plus, but yeah, I'm going to go B plus. And that I want to like make a note that that's just based off of the draft only, because going into the draft, I thought, okay, we have our goalie. We have a lot of really good key pieces on the offensive side. Now we need some defensemen, and then the first pick comes through, and it's another center. I'm like, okay, well, we've already got Cooley, we've already got we've got a handful of players that can play offense, and we're going with another like high skilled offensive player. I didn't know what they had cooking in terms of free agency and who they were. I'm assuming at that point they probably already had an idea of who they were targeting with trades and free agency and whatnot. But just based on the draft alone, I thought they were going to go in a different direction. But as a whole, with what they've done between the draft and free agency and trades, I might tick that up to like an A minus, but I'll just say based on the draft alone, if we're focusing just purely on what they drafted, I'll go B plus.
B plus, I'll take it. And you know what? I might as well be, even though I think I agree with you guys in the BB plus range, I'm going to go with an A minus for history's sake, because I feel like if you look at picking up Iginla in the first round, it's such a good, crisp, fan, get you excited pick. There was, if you looked at that, there was the best, if you go by best available, he was not the best available at the time. But I think in terms of excitement and potential, I think he had more potential to put fans in the stands and produce on the ice. I think that was a twofer, because I think there was the defenseman that you were likely going to go to, unless you've watched hockey a lot, you probably didn't know any of them. I can't imagine that too many casual fans are paying too close attention to the NCAA. Even people who win it, the Zeev Bayam out of Denver, I mean, he's very, very good, but again, I just don't know what percentage of casual fans are actually paying attention to the NCAA until the Frozen Four. But even then, the Russians, I don't think too many Americans are paying attention to the KHL at all. So even if you take Antoine Vasiliev, they're good defensemen, and they would have been good on the team. But I think Iginla just alone, in terms of if you take the total package, he alone is an A plus draft pick. And then the rest, like you said, very heavy on centers, which historically, if you look at the Arizona Coyotes history over the last few years, the coaching staff and Bill Armstrong have had a habit of converting centers to wingers. So I don't mind that we overstacked at center. And then, of course, defensemen. I feel like you can never have too many defensemen. There's going to be a lot of talent in terms of forward. But if you can get some homegrown defensemen, then you're in good shape. And speaking of homegrown, I want to talk a little bit philosophically, not necessarily about any one player in the draft, but I want to talk philosophical drafting techniques. So somebody asked me, they said, Randon, you're just a fan of hockey. What do you know about drafting and free agency? Like what gives you the right to sit here and tell us about it? And I have two answers to that. So first, I have seen the movie Moneyball. What that does is that makes me an expert on the economics and player values in baseball specifically, but also in terms of sports in general. And so I have that ability to look at the value of players and also the limitations of scouting. That's a very important part of that movie that it taught me, the limitations of scouting. And then the financial aspects and the value of contracts. So obviously, having seen Moneyball, and Ryan, Dustin, if you have also seen that movie, then you guys are also qualified to speak on this. And also another movie that we have all seen, which is Miracle, which gives us a unique perspective on rating hockey players specifically, because sometimes we're not looking for the best players. We're looking for the right ones. And that's all the expertise I need is just watching those two movies, which I may be the only person in history to have seen both of those movies. So I'm practically an expert on all things. But I want to talk with you guys about philosophical drafting, about, is it more important to draft and develop, or is it more important to just kind of poach from free agency, and developing draft picks is less important as utilizing draft picks to trade for value that's already materialized. There is a lot of Twitter chatter about, when we talk about our free agency, about kind of moving away from the time-tested Bill Armstrong mentality of draft and develop, draft and develop, draft and develop, as if you bring in somebody from outside the organization that you didn't draft, that's a bad thing, that's a negative, that's somehow a stain on the culture. Ryan, give me some thoughts. What do you think about philosophically? Is it all about drafting, developing? Is it all about just utilizing your picks and getting time-tested talent? Like, what's your thought process going into drafts on a philosophical level?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it, kind of like you were saying, but I think the bigger issue is what you're going into. Like, say you're a GM going into a new team. Does that team are they a destination team? Like your Bostons, your Tampa Bays, your Pittsburgh, your Vancouver, your Edmonton, Colorado, the teams that are competing every year, Dallas, Vegas? Or are you one of those teams like the Buffalo Sabres, who are just a developmental camp for the rest of the NHL, who then you let come and grab and take and pick whenever you want, kind of like the Florida Panthers, which they won the Stanley Cup. And I think their method might be the best, in that you suck for a long time, so you kind of get an established farm system of draft picks that are more highly rated, that are more likely to be NHL ready guys. And then you move those to get younger guys who are already established NHL players, like a Sam Reinhart, a Matthew Tkachuk, a Brandon Montour. And then when you got a home drafted guy like Andrew Barkov or Sasha Barkov, who's the best player in the NHL if you're looking at overall NHL forwards, we can argue later if you want to. But with some teams, the draft and develop works because you can kind of sit down, like Edmonton. They're a great example of sucking for a long time, but then you get to draft guys like Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Think about it. Edmonton had the first round draft pick for like 7 years in a row. It was bullshit. But still haven't won a cup. Whereas Florida, yeah, they were a bottom team for a while. You know, Luongo did his best to get them to a playoff appearance, but they didn't really have any, so they used a lot of trading, and then they traded for the right piece. That's a bigger thing I think you have to work, is getting the right piece in that trade. If you're going to try to build your team through trading and free agency, is you got to get a guy who's going to work. And Florida, it all has worked out for them. But look at Carolina. Every year, Carolina's making trades, bringing in guys, and then it falls apart and they end up leaving for nothing. And they don't have a lot of homegrown things going for them. Not very well. So I think philosophically, it depends on what your organization has done in like what you're coming into or what you've done in the past. And then trying to like do both is very difficult to manage. Because like really Florida, the only main guy I can think that they drafted were what? Aaron Ekblad, maybe, or Ekholm, whichever one they had on their team, and then Barkov. Everybody else has pretty much been like, yeah, we're going to bring you in. But it's worked out with who they've brought in. But I like the free agency more because I feel like it's easier to take a risk on a free agent than it is trying to develop a kid in the minors for him to just bust out. You know what I mean? Especially if you're going to pay them a lot of money. So that's my philosophy.
I like it. Now, Dustin, you are the resident expert in terms of the NBA and specifically the Jazz. So I think you've seen a lot of this drafting philosophy in terms of draft and develop, in terms of potentially tanking and things like that. What's your philosophy in terms of if you were running an organization, would you be all in on draft and develop, or would you be more of a free agency kind of guy?
So I think it depends on where you are as a franchise and also what league you're in. Like you said, you made the comparison to the NBA and Utah. As long as the NBA is the way that it is, Utah's going to have to be a draft and develop, or even just like trade for guys that are like sort of lower tier that you think you can get more out of, but mostly just draft and develop, because the Jazz aren't going to get any big name, big, like high caliber free agents to come to Utah. That's a little bit different in the NHL, where if Utah can afford them, and right now they have cap space to afford higher paid players, you can get them to come to Utah in the NHL. It's not the same type of there's not the same type of stigma about like, oh, I don't want to go to Utah. They don't have a nightlife. That was a big thing a handful of years ago during a series with the LA Clippers, I believe it was, where people were saying, oh, Utah they don't have nightlife. There's no fun in Utah. There's no clubs to go to. And that's sort of like that's more centered around the NBA, not so much the NHL. You know, a lot of NHL players are the types of guys that are going to be staying out until 2 a.m, wanting to just go clubbing and drinking and popping bottles in the back room, like a lot of the players in the NBA will. But I think so the Jazz, they have to be a draft and develop. I think in the NHL, the best idea is probably just a hybrid between the two. You want to draft and develop your core and sort of have your guys, and then identify the pieces that you need to add. Identify, okay, we need a high level defender on the blue line. We need a high caliber goalie. We need somebody who can do this. We need somebody who can do that. And you target those guys in through free agency or through trades, and sort of just run like a hybrid of the two. That to me feels like the best idea to go with it in the NHL. Although I do think, just based on what contracts are and how affordable some of them can be, if there was something like a Moneyball approach that was going to work, I think it could still work in the NHL. But yeah, I think it's probably just a hybrid of those two. You want to draft and develop your core, bring in some free agent signings to fill holes and to fill needs that you have, and just build it that way.
I think the Moneyball approach maybe played too much by the previous owner, but without the analytical approach. It was simply the I don't want to spend money. And that's kind of been a big talking point too, is that you've got a owner now in Ryan Smith who wants to quote, or will quote, spend money. And so that kind of, I think, gives it the impression that you're just going to go out there and try to buy up all this talent. And I don't necessarily think that an owner alone can make that decision. They can green light a decision like that to tell your GM, hey, go out there, get the guy you want because I'm willing to pay for him. I'm willing to, not make 17 million extra dollars because I don't necessarily need that $17 million or whatever their reason is, but they say, go to the cap, right? Go right up to the cap. Don't stay 30 million below the ceiling, or get right up to the floor and go no more because you want to squeeze every dollar of profitability out. And so when you have an owner that is quote willing to spend, I think you're more inclined to maybe go for the free agency. I just feel like it's worked. It's just worked recently in terms of like not needing to rely on the draft. And certainly you always want to have a core of young guys. And I don't want to dehumanize them by any means and purely look at them just as assets, because that's an argument too, is that you need these assets to trade away, right? Like, well, maybe Florida only had 3 guys that they drafted, but they drafted all the people that they traded to get the guys, and maybe that's the case, but it could also be the case that they took on contracts that the teams who had them didn't want. You see this a lot, right? Teams can no longer afford to keep their best, most high-paid players, and other teams who are in that position will take them away. This is not exclusive to the NFL or to the NHL. This happens in all the leagues. Well, I would say most of the leagues, at least, that teams just simply can't afford to keep their best players anymore, right? And then you go into the concept of the rebuild, right? Which is obviously Arizona has been in the rebuild. But if you're a team that's focused on draft and develop, it's hard sometimes to know when the rebuild ends or when the rebuild is supposed to end. Does the rebuild end when we make the playoffs? Does the rebuild end when we win the Stanley Cup? Does the rebuild end after an arbitrary 5-year period? And so I think it's like speaking from a casual fans, I think that's why rebuilds are so frustrating. It's because they're so vague and ambiguous, and you always want to be drafting and developing. So what's this concept of a rebuild when that should be our mentality anyway? Take a Utah fans, you've heard this in college football, right? We don't rebuild, we restock or we retool kind of thing. And I think like that's a philosophical term that sure everybody wants to get to, but how do you know if you're there? And so that's going to be, I think, one of the fun things to watch in terms of the Utah Hockey Club is you have a lot of salty Arizona fans right now, because right now they're seeing what they feel is a culmination of years of heartache and those really downtrodden rebuild years. But there's not any guarantee that rebuild's over. But they're really sad because the moves we made in both the draft and free agency, which we're about to talk about, really make it seem like we're on the cusp of that rebuild being over and Utah's ready to compete. And so it's going to be exciting to watch Utah over the next few years. Like I said, we're maybe not going to win the cup year one, but we're going to compete year one, and ending a playoff drought, because we don't count the COVID year. So ending quite a long playoff drought is going to be quite exciting, and the Arizona fans are going to be salty because we get it and they don't. But guys, Ryan, you go.
Do you want to know why they're salty? Because they're seeing in front of their eyes what the change of an owner does to change the culture of a team. Because honestly, the owners in Arizona, not trying to blame anybody, but if there's anybody to blame, pretty sure it's Alex, whatever his stupid name was. There was no good culture in the Arizona Coyotes organization. They were shitty to employees. They were shitty to hotel staffs. They didn't pay bills. Now, those fans who have been dealing with trying to be fans of an organization that has not given a shit about them are seeing that organization they gave a shit about get given a shit about by the owners, to where the whole culture of the team is changing. And sure, Utah might not be a destination for jazz players, but Arizona wasn't a destination for hockey players because of how bad the situation sucks. The situation in Utah is looking up pretty fucking good. The owner's spending money, so players and free agency are like, well, shit, they're willing to pay. They're not going to be cheap. They're building them a brand new stadium and facility to live in and practice. Like, we're showing them like we're going to become the NHL's newest destination, better than Vegas, better than that joke of an AHL team they call the Kraken, all of it. Utah we are changing the culture. This is what it's about. And that's why those fans are salty.
This podcast is going to have more hate for the Pacific Division than it is going to have for the Central Division that we're in.
We're going to take over the Pacific Division. I don't even think we're in it. Aren't we in the Central?
Nope, we're in the Central, but we're going to hate. We're going to hate on
we're taking the Pacific too, boys. We're taking it all. I ain't scared. Bring on the hate.
Well, Ryan, Dustin, there is a lot to be excited about the future because now let's move our focus away from the draft and develop because some big moves were also made in free agency. Free agency started on July 1st, but even before free agency, when the trades were happening, we're going to consider it free agency because it was just the draft, free agency, it all kind of rolls into one. Let's start with the big one, the news dropping. Defense, we talked about it, was the big need, the big hole, and we filled it in a big way, bringing in Mikhail Sergachev from Tampa Bay, two-time Stanley Cup winning defenseman, and all we had to do was give away a very potentially good center in Connor Geekie and a very good up-and-coming defenseman in JJ Moser, but we got our man to man the blue line. Ryan, what do you think about him? And Dustin, let's get your thoughts too.
Oh, this was the best news I've had in a long time when I woke up and read the Sergachev trade. Because really, the biggest complaint I have had for this team has been no defense, but not even that. To have a defenseman who is a proven leader like Mikhail Sergachev. Sure, he played with Victor Hedman, so maybe he wasn't the number one lead, but he learned from Victor Hedman and Steven Stamkos what it's like to be a leader on the blue line in the locker room. And I think he's the perfect guy to bring in because he's only 27, which is crazy to think, but he is in the prime of his career and he is a monster when he is healthy. He is scary. Sure, guys, he's not going to get us. He's no Cale Makar. He's no offensive juggernaut out there, but he's good at moving the puck out of the zone. And more importantly, he is a shutdown defenseman and a power play and penalty kill specialist. It's great. It's exactly what the team needed. And to be the first trade of the Utah Hockey Club franchise, I love that Ryan Smith was like, I got to make an impact. I got to make a statement to show these fans, the real hockey fans, not just the casuals who are being like, oh, okay, well, let's watch hockey now. We're excited. The real fans like us, he was like, I got to make them happy. I'm going to go get the number one need of this team. And he's locked up for 8 years at 8.5, which is a great cap hit when we have all the money we have to spend. Really, it was a 5 out of 5 trade. I loved every second of it. And I am so proud of Ryan Smith and Bill Armstrong and the team for pulling that one off.
Dustin, what did you think about the trade? You probably haven't seen too much in terms of Tampa Bay outside of the playoffs. What do you know? From your perspective, are you excited about it?
So I'm excited about it because after the trades went through, I said to myself, okay, let's learn a little bit about these guys. I asked both of you, what do we think about this trade with when we picked up Sergachev? And I believe it was Ryan who told me he's a top 10 defenseman in the league right now. I went to read about it and I found an article on The Athletic. And the first 2 lines of that article say, Mikhail Sergachev and John Marino, welcome to Utah. Utah, welcome to the playoffs. And that's signals to me that right now, this team is in win now mode. We talked about this an episode or 2 ago, whether or not Utah was going to be sort of like, are they going to be rebuilding? Are they going to be retooling? Are they going to do kind of like a slow burn as they try to work their way to the playoffs? Or are they going to try and make some big name splash moves right out of the gate? And this answered it in spades. Utah wants to win, and they want to win now. They want to take the high that the team has right now of relocating, of having like people in droves signing up for season tickets, doing everything they can to get to games. They want to capture this high and keep it there. They're bringing in 2 very good, very high-level defensive players, which we've mentioned before was the question mark of this team with no defenseman under contract going into next year. They signed a couple of guys, like they signed Spicy Tuna, who's technically defenseman, but he's not going to be the type of guy that like Sergachev and Marino are. That's more than likely your number one line, the defensive unit on your number one line. And they're making moves to win right now, which has me really excited because the high of bringing a team to Utah could really like fizzle out pretty quickly if they just turned into like a 400%. Like if they were sitting right around the like 40% a win mark, if they're sitting at the end of the season around like 30 and 50, 35 and 45, or 36, 46, somewhere around there, that high can fizzle away pretty quickly. I'm very excited that they're in win now mode.
Absolutely. I think if you go another season, barring any catastrophic injuries, right? If no injuries, we get the roster that we look that is shaping up, and we go 8th in the Central again. Oh man, that's not going to be good. Not going to be good at all. Luckily, we didn't have to. I don't think we had to give away the farm to get Mikhail Sergachev. So we did give away JJ Moser, who was a very up and coming defenseman, a very high ceiling defenseman, but still very young and still has a lot to learn, a lot to prove. And then a lot of excitement around Connor Geekie, who's never played an NHL game before. He was drafted the same year Logan Cooley was, later in that first round. And what you see is a lot of his hype from his Canadian juniors, which he went back to. He did play 2 playoff games with the Tucson Roadrunners, but I don't think he was even considered to be playing in the NHL last year, whereas Logan Cooley played the whole year. So yeah, he was drafted in the first round. Yeah, he played well in the Canadian juniors, but it's not like he's Sidney Crosby. I think there was a lot of copium from the Tampa Bay fans basically saying, which was kind of my knee-jerk reaction before I came back down to earth, was, Utah got fleeced. Look at we just brought in some potential and we traded away an aging, injured bum of a defenseman. No, he's not a bum of a defenseman at all. He's coming off of a big injury, but with the offseason to recuperate, I think he's going to be at the top of his game, just as good as he was in Tampa Bay. And it's going to be exciting to watch. Now, Dustin, you also said we brought in John Marino, coming from New Jersey, also played for Pittsburgh a little bit, who's another lockdown defense. Now, we talked about this. We talked about 2 potential options for the first line. And how do you exploit the natural gifted offensive talents of Clayton Keller, but kind of hide some of the defensive deficiencies? And so there's 2 options. You either go all out for an offensive defenseman and you recreate the Edmonton Oilers first line, where your goal is just to simply outscore them and defense doesn't matter because you're going to be spending 90% of that shift in the offensive zone. Or you go the other way and you go 2 lockdown puck moving defensemen who will play lockdown defense and then move the puck back into the offensive zone to let Clayton Keller do what Clayton Keller does best, and that's score goals. And that's the route we took, right? We didn't get a magical all-out offensive defenseman. We got lockdown defenseman. We re-signed Sean Durzi, who had played with that was a big question mark. It was, are we going to re-sign him? And we absolutely did. And so if it's going to be Sergachev, Marino on line 1, you're going to see Durzi and potentially another exciting pickup for Ryan. I know Ian Cole, and that's maybe your second line. And then you have Juuso Valimaki, who played for Arizona as well. And of course, homegrown Michael Kesselring. Now, will you put the 2 rookies on the third line, or will you mix and match and Ian Cole plays kind of bouncing? I think that remains to be seen. But Ryan, you're very excited about Ian Cole. Do you want to talk a little bit about him?
So as we were saying with the team, like you guys brought up, if we come in 8th in the Central, that's all the momentum we've built with this rebrand of the team. And one thing I think that could potentially do that is having a lot of young guys with no veteran presence. And one of basically the 2 things I'm happiest about with Ian Cole is 1, 2 Stanley Cups, as Randon was saying, but he doesn't just have 2 rings like he was on the team. No, he was a very important member of the Colorado Avalanche's Cup. And then he won with Randon, if you could look that up for me or somebody, just to throw out there so we know whoever. But Ian Cole brings a veteran presence to a third or to the team where you can pair him with any of the rookies and they're going to get to play with a guy who's got NHL experience, got very good NHL experience and 2 cups. And I think another big thing Utah fans can sit with is it's hard to play in Arizona. It was difficult because you were in not an arena built for you. The owner didn't care about you. You weren't winning very many games. Sure, the fans were on your side, but you know what I mean? It's hard to play in quiet arenas when you have nothing to look forward to. All the guys we're bringing in get to play in front of a very hyped Utah crowd who is excited to have hockey back. So that's one less thing all of these guys have to worry about is, if we're going to get booed, the stadium's going to be quiet, the fans aren't going to, it's like, no, we have your guy, like, we are going to ride for you guys. And we believe, and all the guys we brought in, but especially Cole, he's a little old, which, I mean, it's kind of hard on defensemen getting up there in age, but he's not too old to where he's not going to be a top guy. I don't think he's going to be getting 20 minutes of ice time a game, but if he can get out there and give us 17, 18, maybe even 15, but teaching the younger guys like how to play that lockdown kind of defense. And he's a great penalty killer. He always has been, if I remember correctly. But I think Ryan Smith did a great job of addressing not just the defense problem of the team, but addressing a veteran defense on the team. Because, like we were saying with Sergachev, 27 years old, 2 cups. Ian Cole, 35, 2 cups. And then we got a forward we'll talk about in a little bit who brings another ring to the... So we added 5 Stanley Cup champions in one day to this team. And I can't imagine the morale boost that brings to a locker room of guys who are young, who've never got to experience real good winning NHL culture. And I think the guys we brought in are going to give those rookies and those younger guys like Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, they're going to give them, kind of show them what it's like to do it. And I think it's just going to motivate everybody. And we were talking about, when does a rebuild end? I'll tell you one thing, Ryan Smith made it very clear, our rebuild is over. We are going to compete this year. We might not get past the first round of the playoffs, but looking at our team on paper, there's no reason we're not a playoff team in the West. Are we good to win the division? I wouldn't hold my breath. That doesn't matter. Like, who wins the division? Who cares?
Well, we got a division rival in Nashville who grabbed my guy that I wanted in Steven Stamkos. I was expecting the Utah to make a real big run at Steven Stamkos and overpay him for the sole purpose of showing these young guys what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. And that, for me, would have been the price of admission. But guess what? He's over in Nashville. And so I didn't even like him. I don't even like the guy. I talked to a lot of people, and they say he's not even a very good hockey player. And so I don't even care. And Nashville's probably, for all that money they spent, they think they did better in the draft and free agency. They did not. No, they just went and they bought a bunch of old has-beens. But not Utah. We're grabbing cup winners. Ryan, you mentioned him. Kevin Stenlund from Florida, who's going to give us some grinded out, probably third line type guy, maybe in the center, but we'll see. And we still have some question marks and some contracts. I think the big one that I'm looking at is Barrett Hayton. Do we re-sign Barrett? What does that contract look like? We still have, correct me if I'm wrong, about $17 million in cap space. I don't know if that counts with the LITR or the long-term injury, but we could sign another superstar if we wanted to. But I don't think we need to sign I don't think we need to go out and get another big name free agent. There's not too many left anyway. You re-sign Barrett, maybe you get Dylan Guenther to come up. You've obviously got Josh Doan, you've got Julian Lutz in the minors. They posted a video. I don't know if you guys saw this on Utah's Twitter from their training camp of Maverick Lamoureux. He was a defenseman who was drafted in the first round after Simashev, who seems like he's going to stay in Russia for this next year. I don't believe we see him, but we may see Maverick Lamoureux. Certainly in Tucson, you'll see him. And maybe, depending on how it shakes out, he may make it. If you run with a 7th defenseman, traditionally you don't. You just run with 6, but some teams throw in a 7th defenseman if the need arises. But you might see Maverick this season, depending on how the 3 existing blue lines go. But we do have, I don't think there's any need to sign anymore other than Barrett Hayton. And then I think you have your team. I think you have your team. And what we'll do is we'll look at here in the next month or so. Once free agency starts to calm down, once most of the big trades have been made, and we start to see these rosters really solidify through into training camp, and we'll start to break down. Okay, the floor was 8th in the Central. Okay, where do we need to be to make the playoffs? And what does the West look like? What points, and we'll start to break that down based on what the other teams look like, based on what Utah looks like. But Ryan, you said it best. Like I think this signals that the rebuild is over, and we're ready to compete now. And I do believe we make the playoffs, even if it is just a wild card spot. I do believe the playoffs are coming to Utah the first year they're here. Dustin, do you agree? Are you going to get tickets to that playoff game?
I agree. And if I won't say if, when they make the playoffs, I'm going to be in the stands.
Well, season tickets are on sale now, but regular season tickets go on sale July 12th. The season schedule is out. You can go to utahhockeyclub.com to take a look at the schedule that has been released. Guys, I hope you're going to be joining me. I'll be down in Las Vegas, November 30th. Utah plays Las Vegas. We already booked the hotel. So I'm going to go heckle the Golden Knights, my old team, and throw some booze out there and support Utah. And we'll be there in the opener against Chicago in October. There's just so much excitement to be had. Any closing thoughts on the draft, on free agency, anything we've talked about today, Ryan?
Yeah, I just had one more thought. One thing that we just didn't mention is a big thing we needed for this team was a defense for one specific reason, in my opinion, was for Connor Ingram behind the net or in the net, because now I honestly believe the D-man they brought in, and if we get a good system in of getting the puck when it's in our zone and getting it up to these speedy dudes, get out of the zone quick kind of mentality, which I think could look a lot like Tampa's system when they won the cup, because it was pretty much if anybody dumped it in, Hedman or Sergachev would bury it into the corner, get it up, and then Braden Point or, they would take off. And with Connor, I'm so excited for him to have that, the confidence boost, the confidence that Ryan Smith has given this team, at least in my opinion, if I was on the team and how I would feel, it's got to be top 10. I think we had the best draft day and free agency of any team. Don't get me wrong, Nashville, great job. You guys did good. But I think we showed everybody in one day we're here to play. We are not the same Arizona Coyotes who have been bumming around and, for the last few years, kind of just being a team. It's like, no, man, this is no longer easy wins on your calendar. We're coming. We're here and we're coming.
I don't want to pour the salt on the wound for the Arizona fans because most of them are good people, but there's a few out there in Twitter land that are kind of jerks. But
you don't have to. I will. I'll pour the salt on them. It's kind of funny, I don't care,
because it's like you see the reaction from around the league, right? The reaction to the draft, the reaction to free agency moves that Utah's making, and the universal reaction is, wow, this is what it looks like when an owner cares about their organization, or this is what it looks like when a team actually tries to win and makes moves to win. And I get it. I would be, I'd be pissed if I were you guys. You believed in it. You believed in the draft and develop, and you were sold that draft and develop's the only way. And free agency is a chump's move, and you got to draft and develop. And guess what? That's good. We want that. But we've also showed that you do have to make moves, right? You have to fill roster holes through not just rookies and hope that your rookie's the best, because the draft history isn't filled with home runs. It's not filled with grand slams. You got obviously Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, and some others that are good, but your draft and develop only works if you get those all-stars, those perennial type talents, those generational type talents. And the weird thing is they were never quite that bad to give them the lottery lock to get that guy. So it was like this purgatory. It wasn't even hell. It was like purgatory. And now it's over. Come join us. Come join us. You're not getting a team anytime soon. Come join us.
Yeah, they can still support their team. It's just our team, like the Bugs Bunny communist meme. It's our team. Like, come over, join us, guys. It's not that bad over here.
Dustin, do you welcome the Arizona fans?
I do. I want to welcome them with open arms. They didn't lose the team because of themselves. So come on, be fans of the Utah Hockey Club. Come up, catch a game in the Delta Center. We'll show you what it's like to root for your team in an actual arena filled with actual fans who know how to make noise. We'll show you how it's done so that, who knows, maybe 10, 15 years down the line, if there's an expansion team and they choose to plop it back down in Arizona, you'll really know how to do it right when hockey comes back to Arizona. So yeah, I welcome them.
We're showing them how it's done both on and off the ice. There's going to be a lot of fun things to talk about still. I know we're going into the off season, and so the podcast traditionally would also take some off season break during this time after the draft, after the free agent frenzy. We're going to stick with you. We're going to keep bringing you some episodes. We're going to keep talking about the rules of hockey. We're going to keep talking about the Central Division as a whole, and we're going to try to bring in some new fans and get you guys caught up to speed. And so we're going to be along the ride with you as we go into these long months now. The schedule ready, put it on the calendar. What is it? July, August, September, October, 3 months and a few weeks until hockey is finally here in Utah. Guys, thanks so much for listening. I'm Randon with Ryan and Dustin. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Two Line Pass podcast. Please follow us on Twitter at the Two Line Pass. You can follow Dustin at Highlights Ute. You can follow Randon at TLP Randon and Ryan at Carnes Ryan 0420. During the off-season, new episodes of the podcast drop every Wednesday with bonus episodes throughout. And during the season, we will have our weekly show plus game day episodes so you don't miss a minute of the action.